We hear the word bipolar thrown around all the time, and most people just think mood swings. But what if I told you that's like calling a hurricane just a bit of wind? In this explainer, we're going to go deep, right under the hood, to see what's actually happening in the brain on a biological level. Let's get right into it. So, let's tackle that head on. Is this really just about being moody? The short answer? Not even close. That term is a massive oversimplification of a really serious neurobiological condition. Seriously, it's like calling an earthquake a little shake. Because what we're really talking about here, at the very core, is a failure of the brain's own regulatory system. Its ability to keep itself in balance is just broken. This isn't just about feeling off, it's a huge systemic shift in the brain's entire energy grid and its communication network. The system gets pushed into total overdrive and loses that natural, stable baseline. Okay, a great way to think about this is like a broken thermostat, right? In a healthy brain, you've got all these amazing systems working to keep everything, well, comfortable, in balance. But in bipolar disorder, that thermostat is shot, and it allows the whole system to swing to these wild, dangerous extremes of hot and cold. And this right here really gets to the heart of the problem. So look on the left. In a neurotypical brain, you've got the prefrontal cortex, kind of like the brain CEO, and it's keeping the limbic system, our emotional engine, in check. It's applying the brakes when needed. But now look at the bipolar brain on the right. That connection, that top-down control, it's disrupted. The brakes are gone, and that emotional engine can either redline into mania or just completely stall out into depression. So let's just put a pin in this idea right here because it's so important. This isn't a mood swing. It's a neurochemical oscillation, a massive, uncontrolled pendulum swing between two biological poles. And it's all driven by brain chemistry. All right, so let's dig into the highs. To really get this disorder, you have to understand mania. And it's not just one thing. It really exists on a spectrum, from what's called hypomania all the way to a full break from reality. So how do we tell the difference? Well, it really comes down to the ceiling of that high. Bipolar 1 means full-blown mania, which can be so intense it leads to psychosis, a literal break from reality. Bipolar 2, on the other hand, is defined by hypomania, which is less intense and doesn't have psychosis. But, and listen, this is so important, because the depressive lows in bipolar 2 can be more frequent and last longer, the suicide risk is actually statistically higher. So what is going on at the cellular level? Well, think of it this way. Dopamine is your brain's big reward chemical. In a manic state, the receptors for dopamine become way too sensitive, which creates this flood of reward signals for everything. At the same time, glutamate, which is basically the brain's main gas pedal, gets jammed to the floor. The entire system is just completely, dangerously supercharged. And this is what that neurochemical storm actually looks like from the outside. That chaotic jumble of thoughts, that's what we call flight of ideas, where the brain is processing information way too fast to filter anything out. That chaos then spills out as logorrhea, which is this pressured, rapid, nonstop speech. And all that dopamine, it creates a feeling of being invincible, a sense of being on top of the world that we call grandiosity. But, what goes up must come down. And after the unbelievable energy burn of a manic episode, the brain has to face a biological reckoning. This is what's known as the mitochondrial crash. I mean, this metaphor is just perfect. Imagine an engine that's been redlined, pushed past its absolute limits, running at max RPM, not for a few seconds, but for days or even weeks on end. The metabolic stress on the system is just immense. Eventually, something has to give. And here's exactly how that crash happens. First, you have the manic episode, redlining the brain. This creates a massive amount of oxidative stress. You can think of that as cellular rust. This stress literally, physically damages the mitochondria, which are the tiny little power plants inside our brain cells. And when the power plants fail, the result isn't just sadness. It's a state of profound neuro-exhaustion. The power has literally been cut. And we really have to let this sink in. Bipolar depression is not just an emotional state. It's a physical state of cellular exhaustion. The brain literally does not have the energy reserves to function properly. And because of this cellular level damage, researchers are starting to realize something huge. Bipolar disorder isn't just in the brain. It's now being seen as a multi-system inflammatory condition. That oxidative stress we talked about, it doesn't just stay in the head. It impacts the entire body, which helps explain why bipolar is linked to a higher risk of things like heart disease and diabetes. So with all of this in mind, it becomes crystal clear why getting treatment as early as possible isn't just about managing symptoms. It's about physically protecting the brain from ongoing damage.
There's this concept in neuroscience called the kindling effect, and it's a perfect analogy. Imagine trying to start a campfire. The first time, you need a lot of kindling, a lot of effort. But once that fire has burned, the wood is charred, and it catches fire much, much more easily the next time. It's the same thing in the brain. Each untreated episode kind of scars the neural pathways, making the brain more sensitive and lowering the trigger point for the next episode.
And this chart shows you exactly what that looks like. You can see how the risk of having another episode, represented by the height of those bars, goes way up after the first one goes untreated. The brain essentially carves a path for itself, making it easier and easier to fall back into these extreme states. So the bottom line is this: getting help early isn't just, well, helpful. It is fundamentally neuroprotective. It's about stopping that kindling process in its tracks and protecting the brain from more scarring and more damage down the line. So how do you stop this cycle? That's where mood stabilizers come in. And it's so important to understand these are not happy pills like some antidepressants. They work on a much deeper, more fundamental level. They actually calm down the electrical overactivity in the brain cells. But they also do something else absolutely crucial. They increase a protein called BDNF. So what the heck is BDNF? Well, the easiest way to think about it is like fertilizer for your brain. Seriously, it's a protein that helps repair the damage caused by those intense neurochemical episodes and even helps grow new, healthy connections between brain cells. It's one of the key ways the brain can actually heal itself.
You know, when you put all of this science together, something really powerful starts to happen. When you understand the biology, the broken thermostat, the mitochondrial crash, the kindling effect, it starts to strip away the shame and the stigma that so often comes with this condition.
And this is really the final, most important takeaway. When we stop seeing bipolar disorder as a character flaw or some kind of personal failing and start seeing it for what it is, a biological dysregulation of the nervous system, it changes everything. It changes how we see it, how we talk about it, and most importantly, how we treat it.
And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. If this is the deep biology behind just one condition, how does this kind of science challenge and change our entire view of what mental health really is?